In today's video, we're going to walk through why Fidelity is wrong and what you actually need to focus your time and attention on instead. If you're new to the channel, hi, I'm Julia, certified financial planner and owner of a retirement planning firm. Throughout my career, I've seen retirees suffer unnecessarily at the hands of poor, generalized retirement advice, and I don't want you to do the same. Not only will we break down why Fidelity's savings rule is misleading and harmful, but I'm going to show you which saving strategies actually do work to get you closer to retirement. I encourage you to stay through the end of the video because I'm going to cover savings advice you won't find anywhere else. So let's get into it. I want to start by saying that of all of the possible custodians that you could use to self-direct your investment accounts, Fidelity is one of the best. It has excellent low-cost funds and an easy-to-use platform. It's very popular for do-it-yourselfers because of these things. However, their advice around how much you need to retire successfully is inaccurate. It can lead people to work for too long or retire too early, which are two things that I'm passionate about avoiding. In general, unless you have significant legacy goals, I don't believe that retirees should have so much saved that they make their heirs filthy rich upon their death. I also believe that in general, most retirees want to have enough to feel comfortable to cover their liabilities and potential health events, and to enjoy themselves after their working career. On the flip side, no one wants to retire too early and then have to go back to work because of a market crash, health event, or just not having enough saved. Before we can get into the steps you need to take to retire successfully, let's break down Fidelity's savings rule. Fidelity released an article in August of 2024 regarding how much you need to have saved by certain ages to retire successfully. And I'll put a link to that below. This savings rule is based entirely on your salary and claims that you need to have 1 times your salary saved by age 30, 3 times your salary saved by age 40, 6 times your salary saved by age 50, 7 times salary saved by 55, 8 times salary saved by age 60, and 10 times your salary saved by age 67. So for instance, if you're 55 years old and you're currently making $200,000 a year, you need to have 1.4 saved for retirement to be on track. Now, clearly they are using several assumptions to support this thesis. 1, you have to have more than 50% of your savings in stock. And 2, you're going to retire at age 67. 3, you're going to live to age 94. Now, obviously, these assumptions only apply to a small percentage of people. In fact, the average retirement age in America is 64. So that's the first clear red flag in the savings rule. But unfortunately, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because I'm going to show you the 2 most important red flags with real-life examples that actually use these arbitrary assumptions, and then I'll show you the strategies you actually need to pay attention to in order to retire successfully. The first main issue I have with the savings rule is that it's based on your salary, which is an extremely poor metric for tracking how close you are to retirement. Retirement is a complex and dynamic event that befuddles even the most financially savvy people, and this rule makes an already confusing topic even more so. The 2 most important pieces of information to evaluate your retirement readiness are how much you want to spend in retirement and when you want to retire. Your salary has absolutely nothing to do with how much you need to have saved in order to retire. In fact, our salaries or our earnings typically change every single year, whether you own your own business or you work for a company. And hopefully that number trends up over time, but sometimes it goes in the opposite direction, making this rule of thumb not only inaccurate, but impossible to follow. This rule can easily push folks to retire too early, or more likely too late. But for instance, if your starting salary was $40,000 and now you make $80,000, and you're 55 years old, do you need to have $280,000 saved or $560,000 saved to be on track? There is absolutely no way to know the answer to this question. Secondly, your salary doesn't dictate what you spend every year, which is a much more useful metric for retirement readiness. I sit with retiree hopefuls every day, and rarely does someone spend the exact amount that they net every year. Not to mention the fact that our expenses change, upon retirement and really every year for almost everyone. There are 2 scenarios that I see pre-retirement most often. The first is that folks are spending far less than what they net every year. And after running an analysis on our clients' net savings, I find that folks in this category are saving anywhere between $20,000 a year and $300,000 a year, with the median being $50,000. These people also don't typically plan to enhance their lifestyle by a significant margin once they retire. Sure, many of them will travel or improve their home or any other, typical retirement expense, but that increase only takes them to 75 to 85% of their current net salary. So claiming that this demographic needs 10x salary to retire at age 67 is just a gross exaggeration. The second scenario we see is that folks are spending more than what they currently bring in every year. So this means that they're pulling from other assets to pay their bills or they're in debt. And because of that, this demographic needs to have far more saved in order to meet their obligations in retirement. Meet Jim, age 60. He wants to retire at 62, but doesn't feel confident that he'll have enough money. So he assumes he'll be ready by age 67. He currently spends $70,000 a year, but wants to slightly increase that to $75,000 upon retirement. We all know that retirement spending is not static and that you'll typically spend the most at first before your expenses decrease over time. At age 80, his expenses will decrease to $50,000 in today's dollars. And these expenses will inflate at 3% per year. His current salary is $200,000, and below that, we can see his full retirement age Social Security benefit of $48,300 per year. His investable assets are as follows. He has $400,000 in a brokerage account, $950,000 in an IRA, and $130,000 in a Roth IRA. Now, according to Fidelity, he should have $1.6 million saved now, but needs to wait to age 67 to retire, where he'll need to have $2 million saved to make it to age 94. Now, Jim has no debt and no legacy goals. He wants to spend $75,000 per year in retirement, but unfortunately, he only has $1.48 saved. And the majority of his investments are in stock, but even with this really big net worth, he's still behind in Fidelity's eyes. He needs to save more and keep working to age 67 to get to that 10x of his salary to retire safely. Now, fortunately, Jim came to me asking for help to figure out when he can safely retire. So let's run the numbers. First, we need to stress test his portfolio to see what he'd lose in a market crash and how that would affect him if it happened this year. Here we can see his allocation breakdown and average return. But here we can see what he would lose if we had another Great Recession, where the market lost 53.1%. So he would lose 38.9%, or roughly $780,000 of his $1.48 million. We're going to run this through a Monte Carlo analysis, which is currently the best way to analyze the success of a financial plan. Simply put, the computer runs your spending, your income, and your investments through 1,000 different market scenarios of investment return and inflation figures to see how many are successful. So in other words, are you able to maintain your lifestyle to your life expectancy without running out of money? So if we have a market crash this year and he works to age 67, he still has a 99% chance of success, meaning that 990 of the 1,000 different investment returns and inflation scenarios were successful. And in present value, Jim will leave anywhere between $1 million and $3.6 million. But wait a minute, Jim doesn't want to leave a legacy, and certainly doesn't want to work to 67 to leave this high of a legacy. Also, in our practice, we look for an 80% chance of success, especially because we assume a big crash on top of a Monte Carlo analysis. No one needs to score 100% here. We make important decisions based on much lower probabilities every day, and the only two guarantees in life are death and taxes. So if we only want an 80% chance of success, Jim can actually retire successfully as early as age 62, which was his original goal. But what if he needs long-term care for the average length of time, which is 3 years between ages 85 and 88 before passing away? If this occurs, he needs to work to age 64 to make sure that he has an 80% chance of financial success. So that's still not age 67. Had he followed Fidelity's savings rule, he would not only feel behind, but he would work for an extra 3 to 5 years for no reason. Who knows the kind of mental strain this would have caused him for absolutely no benefit? And this is why this type of generalized advice put out by reputable sources is so harmful. Now, of course, this is a video aimed to show you why Fidelity's advice is unrealistic. However, to really understand what savings advice is applicable to you, you need advice tailored to your situation. And after working with hundreds of retirees, I've seen how everyone's situation truly is different, meaning that advice that applies to one person won't apply to the next. Now, this actually reminds me of a conversation I had last week with a client who was struggling with these exact retirement statistics we've covered today. Now we know, why and how Fidelity's savings rule is unhelpful. So now let's talk about some rules that actually are helpful that you should be using in your savings journey. First, you need to define your retirement preferences, meaning figure out what age is ideal for you and how much you want to spend per year. Keep in mind that retirement spending is typically shaped in a smile. So your expenses when you initially retire are a lot higher than they are, 10 to 15 years from now. And then that other side of the smile happens if you need long-term care in the future, where expenses can rise back to where they were or above where they were when you first retired. Also, in general, you should be splitting your retirement plan contributions between pre-tax and Roth. So for instance, if you're maxing your 401k at $30,500 per year, $15,250 of that should be going into the Roth portion of your 401k, and that will grow tax-free for the rest of your life. So if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I am big on Roth accounts and that saving all pre-tax is actually harmful to a person's retirement by putting limits not only on how much you can spend, but how much you end up paying in taxes. So I'll also put a link to that video below. And just understand that diversifying your tax landscape while you're still working is so helpful. Okay, now before you change your contribution elections, make sure that you won't be jumping a tax bracket by doing this. So let's use Jim from earlier. He's making $200,000 a year and is saving $20,000 per year into a pre-tax 401k. His wage income is $180,000. He also has $12,000 in total dividends and $3,000 in long-term capital gains, and this puts him in the 24% marginal bracket. We can see that if he puts $10,000 or half of his annual contribution into his Roth 401k to get that tax-free growth over his lifetime, everything else being equal, he will still be in that 24% marginal tax bracket. Now, if this was the case, and if splitting your contributions would push some of that Roth contribution into the 32% tax bracket, it's probably not a good idea. You also want to keep in mind that if you're very close to retirement, you'll likely be in a lower tax bracket when you first retire. Not throughout retirement, but when you first retire. So you might want to do Roth conversions at that lower rate. And this is why tax planning is so important. Your third action step is a rule of thumb, because even though I believe that you need custom advice because rules of thumb don't apply to every person, this is an educational YouTube video, so I'll use my favorite rule of thumb, which is the 20 times spending rule. This rule states that you want to aim to have 20 times what you want to spend in retirement saved before you retire. So clearly there are many variables that could make this too high or too low, like how old you are when you first retire, if you have a pension, and just general individual circumstances, life expectancy, etc. But at least this rule of thumb is based on the most important factor in retirement, which is how much you want to spend. So let's say that you're 55 years old and you want to retire at 62, and you currently have $800,000 saved for retirement. You're saving $2,000 per month and you want to spend $80,000 per year in retirement. This means that you'll need $1.6 million saved, so you're halfway there. So if we go to a compound interest calculator, and I like to use the investor.gov version, and I type in how much you have saved, your monthly savings of $2,000, the length of time, 7 years, and a conservative average annual return of 6%. Now I use 6% because it comments any below average market returns over the next 7 years. And of course, the compound frequency is daily. We can see that this person will have $1.426 million by age 62. So they do need to save a bit more. If we play around with this and increase the savings to $4,000 per month based on these variables, they will have just over $1.6 million at age 62 and should be able to retire based on their preferences. This rule of thumb does assume that you have at least 50% of your portfolio invested in stock at all times. So if you don't want to pay for customized retirement advice, please be sure to read up on the assumptions in each rule of thumb. Now that you know why Fidelity's traditional savings rule is inaccurate and what you should be doing instead, you can alter your savings expectations accordingly. As I just said, you can't walk away from this video thinking that any standard rule of thumb will secure your future. Our analysis of successful retirees has revealed something the big investment firms won't tell you. The most financially secure retirees often ignore these conventional savings rules altogether. Between personalized withdrawal strategies, tax-smart investing, and proper risk management, we found that real retirement success requires a far more customized and sophisticated approach. To help you take that next step, I've created a separate video that dives deeper into everything we've discussed today. In this video, I'll show you the exact framework I use with my clients to create retirement plans that actually work. Click the link in the description and you'll learn how to avoid the common pitfalls that trip up most pre-retirees and discover the specific strategies that can help you create the retirement lifestyle you've always wanted.